international experiences and implement his perspective. This session will be chaired by Dr. Shabnam Sarfaraz. She's member social sector at the Ministry of Planning, Development and Reforms. And the panelists include Brigadier Rahim Faruqi from NLC and Dr. Mohammed Afzal, Joint Chief Economist, Planning Commission, Islamabad, and Ms. Clelia Rontoyani, World Bank, Islamabad, Pakistan. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much. So we will start without any delay. We'll start with the first presentation, which is by Dr. Mohammed Afzal, and following that the remaining panelists will follow.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really thankful Dr. Nadeema, Vice Chancellor PIDE, for inviting me and to share my thoughts with the participants. Ladies and gentlemen, so many questions were raised, observations were made. I may not be able to answer all, but just I'll share with you the current status of PSDP, the priority areas, and how we did this process a little bit easy and fast, having with meetings with the finance division, and then finally approved by the ethnic. So I share all that, and you would appreciate that by adopting this release system, now ministries, divisions are on the easy zone. The most important thing is that we'll be able, I hope, to use the total allocated amount for the current financial year, that is 701 billion. And the other initiative which is recently taken by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, that is PSDP plus. And the total cost of that PSDP plus is 5.5 trillion, which is 8 or 9 times more than PSDP. And that initiative, ladies and gentlemen, for the private sector, and there is little space for the public sector, for the government entities. And where we can, government ministries, divisions can help them, that would be just to facilitate, to ease them to execute their projects. These are of different categories. For example, where the government can't invest a big amount, we invite to private sector, giving them some incentives to complete those projects. And they are also different from time-wise. Some of the initiatives are, which we expect that would be completed within 2 to 3 months, and in second, 1 to 3 years, and some of the initiatives are for the longer span, more than 3 years or 5 years, and the projects are from infra, from water, from energy, from tourism. So that is another initiative. We are also working, Planning Commission is also working on that front. Next. how public sector can improve service delivery to the citizens and how we ensure the service delivery. There is need of political will and ownership. What could be the different options? First, identify services required for the community, identify the key stakeholders for these areas, and develop strategy and execute work, monitor and measure services, and make midterm corrections to take on the fast track initiatives, then monitoring and measure service delivery and continuous improvement. How service delivery can be made possible? Certainly, we need HR, we need investment, local investment, as well as foreign investment. But before to do that, we have to identify the indicators, then to establish measures how we can invite public sector as well as private sector, then simplify the processes. That's, ladies and gentlemen, very important, and digitize the processes to make the things on fast track, clean and neat, and transparency certainly would be there. And then we should be result oriented. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the project life cycle. It should be very good, and at each stage it needs lot many efforts. It starts from the conceptualization. Take all the stakeholders on board before to move ahead, because if concept is good, made on the basis of evidences, then certainly we make good project document, which is known as PC1, and sometimes we call it technical investment proposal project document. So this document contains scope, goal, objectives, actions, input, resources, and go for preparation, having approval of that document. Ladies and gentlemen, there are certain forums who have the mandate to approve these documents. DDWP is there, CDWP is there, ECNIC is there. Then the highest forum is National Economic Council, which is policy making body headed by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So the next is, once you are in the execution phase, then keep your eyes on work plan, cash plan. These are the prerequisite, but we have seen that the ministries and the divisions are lacking with the capacity to make all these documents once the main document PC1 is approved. Then monitoring, the main purpose of monitoring is to keep the project on track, and if there is any sort of problems, irritants, or the changes in the physical progress, there is mismatch between financial progress, physical progress, adjustments can be made. Then, after completion, review stage comes, and we have at Planning Commission development instruments to cover all these. For example, for the project document, there is PC1, but sometime we prepare PC1, PC2 before PC1. And the reason is, if project cost exceeds a limit of 500 million, then PC2 has to be submitted, that is feasibility report, before to go major investment. Then PC3 is again very important development instrument. It has two parts. One, which covers the monthly reports on the basis of monitoring, and the second, quarterly reports. And then completion is reported on PC4, and then after completion means once the project is completed physically and financially. And then we have PC5, which is the last document, and PC5 is for evaluation, whether the project is as it was conceived. So these are 5 documents, but the main focus of the ministries, divisions, entities, area governments, provincial governments remain on PC1, in some of the cases PC2. Hardly we receive PC4 and PC5, which is, I think, a great neglect. All are equally important until unless we are not focusing on PC3, PC4, PC5, we could not get any sort of lesson from the previous wrongdoings. So these are the project approval fora. First is the ACNIC. ACNIC is headed by Finance Minister, and the limit is big. There is composition, members from Planning Commission, line ministries, provincial governments, area governments. Then the second forum is Central Development Working Party, and Central Development Working Party is headed by the Deputy Chairman Planning Commission. And if cost exceeds 2 billion up to 10, CDWP is a forum. Then we have DDWP and PDWP. DDWP is headed by the Secretary, Ministry or Division, and these limits are very recently enhanced. Before it, 60 was the DDWP and 3 billion was the CDWP. Public Sector Development Program. This is a very important task with the Planning Commission, and it's integral part of public sector investment. It reflects the economic policies, priorities of the government. Then PSDP provides much needed physical and social infrastructure in the country to gear up the economy. And PSDP is always aligned towards the objectives, targets of annual 5-year plan and the policy documents. Please have a quick look on that. This is the process, starting from the budget call circular, then indicating the size of the budget, then conveying that budget ceiling to the line ministries. Then there is a priority committee jointly headed by the finance, planning and EAD. And then annual plan coordination committee. It happens 8 to 10 days before the budget. Then National Economic Council, finally we take all that documents for the approval of National Economic Council. And final approval from the Parliament. Next. How many minutes? What? No. Just 2-3 minutes. Next. Public sector development strategy. Next. So this is important strategy for upcoming PSDP 2020-21. It is in the light of recent introduced Act 2019. No unapproved scheme will be financed through next PSDP. Again, some features of the next PSDP. We are going to allocate 90% of the budget for ongoing projects, leaving only 10% for new projects. Less developed areas would be the priority. Next. Next. So this is current PSDP, total allocation, and then distribution among 3 areas: planning, then foreign aid, then Ministry of Finance, and total 701. These are the early position in first, second, third quarter. This is the ceiling. The actual releases in the next slide. Please go. This is the release made so far. Total authorized amount is 464.7 billion, and the expenditures 263.6. These are the common issues of PSDP. Repayment of loan means CDL. In case of NHA and other ministries, Finance Division deduct at source funds from their allocated amount. And there is some issues at the provincial level. They are not passing on the funds to the project authorities once these are authorized by the Finance Division to the provinces. Then non-alignment of policy framework and the projects. Sometimes M&D framework is not a part of project document, which is, I think, great hazard. Reappropriation from one project to another project. Sometimes ministries park funds against those projects which they know will not going to approve those projects. But they think that we'll be able to reappropriate from their own allocated budget. That is the easy way. In the mid of the year, always they come up to reappropriate their allocated budget to their ongoing projects. Then a regular updation in SAP system, which shows the expenditure of the authorized amount. These are again common issues. Frequent changes in project documents, thin spreading, capacity issues, assignment accounts, budget alignment with the donors. But early 80s, you know that donors were used to align their development portfolio with the government of Pakistan, But now the situation is different. We align with them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. For the next presentation, I would request Brigadier Rahim Faruqi from NHC.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, madam. My name is Brigadier Rahim Faruqi. I represent NLC. A small little background, I've spent about 30 years working with FW and NLC as an engineer. So most of the times I'm on the other side of the project execution end. I'm very grateful to Dr. Nadeem to give us this opportunity to come over here to express some of our what we call as implementers' opinion about it. The whole day today I have also listened to Madam, since morning we have heard about a number about strategies and policy making and goals and how they have been achieved and what's to be done and what's not to be done. But I am grateful to General Shahid. He gave a little resume about what the issues are being faced by the actual implementer on ground, that when he goes down and starts to work, what it or he or she faces while executing the PSDP project. Just to start off with, of course, NLC itself has done its own contribution in executing the PSDP projects, in total about 74 billion, not a very large figure as with regards to the figures that we have seen since morning, but still a good enough figure to give us an insight into PSDP, how it's allotted and how we execute it on ground and bring it down to paper. A large chunk goes to various provinces. Earlier we were doing with regards to Punjab and other provinces. But as of today, we have KPK also coming up, and we have a large share of projects within Punjab and KPK and all other provinces, including Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and as well as GB. Some of the issues, I'll come directly to the issues which a contractor or an implementer faces. Looking at the project cycle itself, we have plans and feasibilities that is made. We have a survey and a design carried out by a consultant, followed by a funding approval that comes from these offices. We have an execution monitoring mechanism. General Zahir Shah also identified there are PDs from the planning commissions that are there to review the monitoring that we are carried out. And in the end, there is a long process of handing over and financial close of a project. Now, coming over straight away to the issues where we think that we go folly is, first of all, of course, a plan being made. We have talked a lot about planning today, how it is not cohesive, how these plans don't merge into the goals, and neither the goals merge into whatever we have achieved or what we want to achieve. At times, what we have identified is these are very unrealistic goals. If a government functionary tells us to do 6 billion rupees of a project in 6 months, it's unrealistic, a goal which could never be achieved, and this is with Metro Islamabad. Survey and design, today we don't have the representative from NESPAC because most of the issues are related to the hasty survey or a design which is made before a bidding or a process. There we think that we folly, we make a design, we go for its bidding process, it goes into procurement. After going through a very lengthy procurement process, the project still has got deficiencies as regards to the design and execution. As far as the execution is concerned, when we go into an execution, the first thing we found problem is that the design is not what it was bid. We have talked today in the morning that there is a PEC form which is available for a contract. That form has a very fine line in between its form. It makes the contractor responsible to identify any shortfalls in the design. And this is where it hurts a contractor, where the government department can get back and say, if you knew it was wrong, why didn't you identify it? Cash flows, absolutely not as per the cash flow that are required to execute the project. I have a project for 3 billion in one of the provinces, and this year the total allocation was 300 million. So that means that this is the cash flow, then it's a 10-year project. If it's to be like that, that means that the contractor, and in our case NLC, would have to pump in another billion from our own pocket just to keep the cash flows moving. Design has its own shortfalls. When we go on to ground, we take a design, we find out there is a variation in not only scope of the work, but in the BOQs as well as the structural and infrastructural design itself. Decision making. Now that you have a problem, that there are no funds, there is a design variation, now we start seeking approvals. And the biggest decision making process is a revision of or a VO which is established, and in a worst case scenario it is the PC1 that needs to be revised. Projects have finished 4 years back. Even as of today, I am roaming around within these Q block and P block to get my PC1s revised. It gives me a job to do, but actually it's not good for my country. The other challenges while executing are, of course, there is a consultant, and if I have to hand over this project not only to one client and the client has to hand it over to another client, you can imagine the issues there. Handing over, we have delayed POCs, taking projects and roads. About 3-4 years back, still I am and the contractor really has to face a lot of trouble to get these POCs completed. And then, of course, there are delayed final bills and payments, which usually all good contractors leaves it to the government of Pakistan. They don't pursue their final bills. But since I am paid to do that, so I keep following my final bills and never am successful. This is where your PSDP, where you have talked the whole day, ends up on ground. That's why you will find a project which has not been completed in the due time. You will see road diversions and boards made. Sorry for the inconvenience. This is where the inconvenience stands, where we keep talking about how to get this thing fast-tracked. It's not at all fast-tracked. In the morning we have talked about there's going to be an e-format, there's going to be proper reporting, there's going to be all sorts of good academia put into it. But this is where the project goes and hurdles. Where a project that was supposed to be started in 2014, we completed in 2017 in a 3 years time frame. Until today, my PC1 is not revised, my final bill of 1 billion can't be paid, and I'm still running from pillar to post. So, if there is a consensus to be established that we need to fix up our PSDP, how it should be implemented, we have to all join hands together. And what needs to be done is that we all must sit together more often like this to sort out our issues. Usually we come over here, we are just called and not heard of, but I thought that this opportunity is there, we should let you know what's happening. I represent NLC. NLC is one of those contractors that can afford all this. We have about 28 billion which the government of Pakistan needs to pay in these final bills. But not all contractors would do that, and we are not doing all the projects also. We are doing a very small sum of the projects. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the patience.
Thank you so much. With the next one now we have Mr. Amir Duran.
Thank you very much. I think the lead-in provided by the Brigadier is exactly what my presentation needs. So I've been sitting here since the morning listening to various people telling us how various parts of the process are inefficient. My speaker, the first speaker in today's panel, started by saying that we need political will. I would challenge you to say, as you will see, that we actually have too much political will. And that is what distorts the implementation of PSDP. And I think this morning alluded to this. And a lot of what I'm going to say is work that I have been doing since my World Bank career, but I have since continued it. So I'm simply going to call it implementing better. But first I want to take you back and कौन सा story ये आपने बहुत दफा देख लिया अब तंग आ गई देख के लेकिन I thought that so she has the SDG committee also, so she's seen this, but let's first ask ourselves what are we doing with these allocations? What is the PSDP? What is the ADP actually giving us? And I beg to differ from the gentleman here in the Planning Commission. So what you see here is that Pakistan is a glorified example of how inequality has been perpetuated by wrong systems of fiscal allocation. And that's really, ladies and gentlemen, the basic thing we are here to solve. But unfortunately, Nadeem had thought that because I do not carry the title of economist, he decided to put me in the implementation session. So I'm still happy that I'm allowed to speak officially, though I did spend 18 years trying to be one. So let's, what is really going on? And I think I'm just going to summarize what club member. I do have a club membership now, yeah, sorry, I have to say that. So basically the public expenditure process is inefficient. You've heard different things, but let me give you numbers. The first thing is, there is always a significant difference between planned allocations and actual expenditure. You saw that in Ashraf Yad's presentation, you saw that in Asif Bajwa's presentation. Currently, 8 to 18 years to complete projects, my dear sir, think about that. That's the average continuing both for the ADPs at the provincial level as well as at the national level. Hello? Okay, that's sabotage. Sorry.
Too much for it to take.
Okay. Maybe I'll use this. I'll shut this off. Okay. So very quickly, the public agencies basically take on too much, deliver too little, and there is numeric proof that what ends up being delivered is not national priority, it's the political priority. So all the other projects, as I was very rightly saying, are allocated 100 million just to pay salaries. So, that is how you end up in inefficiencies. And if you take the numbers just in a decade, that number of wastage is really equal to the defense, so-called, our hated defense budget expenditure. So I want you to challenge yourself in understanding that what is it that we are doing wrong. So a key number, and please keep this in mind, Hafiz Pasha's report also bore this out, Pakistani projects cost twice as much and take 3 times as long. Now I'm being very generous because these are averages over 5 years, so we basically took 3 5-year samples. And yes, the industry lacks capacity. A lot of you heard, but here is the result. I mean, I'm showing you actual surveys which show you that the contractors themselves accept that they lack capacity. If you talk to the contractors, then why do you keep getting work? They say, no, we keep getting work, because we are the only people in town. And what are these gaps? If you think about it, there is a delivery troika, right? The client, the contractor, and the consultant. And Brigadier Sahib already mentioned that, right? Now, there are problems in each part of this troika. However, the business environment, when you do surveys, turn out to be the largest. And business environment includes everything from how we manage data, to the business process, to things like security issues. But what we have been missing and have not talked about is the human resource. Realistically speaking, it's the brain drain increasing. Now, these are just numbers. If you look at it, these are number of graduates in the areas that we need. Yeah, thank you. So these are basically what these graphs are showing is the number of people in, basically you need mechanical, electrical, civil engineers, you need vocational people, machine operators, all those, production of those people has gone down. Hello? Should I continue? Okay, so if you think about it, the local market also, what's wrong with the local market? Why are we not attracting? If you look at regional wages, they're higher. In real terms, in nominal terms, the wages have gone down, right? The other important thing, and I think the contractor sitting on this panel will explain this, the contracting input prices, in other words, the base price of input materials are actually lower than in the region, are higher than in the rest of the region, but actually the compounded, so the cost we pay for example, asphalt cement, is actually lower than we pay in the region. So these are just very basic. In cement, bitumen, steel, basic supply. Somebody comes up and says, I'm going to build an Orange Metro. Well, has he ever checked what's the current status of the PSDP vis-a-vis how much cement, steel and bitumen, which are the basic constituents of any infrastructure project. So our essential answer is, no matter how we do the numbers, we run short of bitumen, steel, cement, plus and minus. But this really, ladies and gentlemen, is what is haunting the implementation of the PSDP. And I think we need to realize this is an actual desk-by-desk walk and of a business process. And this is exactly when, the line which you see at the yellow is where you get handed the contract. So you very rightly said, all I have done is I've actually costed out all these numbers, right? That's how I'm able to show you how much time. All the procedures in the grey, by the way, are extra contractual. This is like the police asking, but this is my truck being stuck. It's just fantastic. And these are, and anyone who wants to check these numbers should come. There are really nice sheets. So what really happens? Before I tell you what really happens, is that what I talk about all day. This is again surveyed data. Corruption alone costs us 10 to 15% of the project value. Now that is incredible. No one talked about it. And let me go back now to actual project cycle cash flows. And again, the various are, this is your cycle. The contractor is financing everything from day one. And then, you keep them running and you expect that these guys are going to build capacity. So in summary, I mean, everyone has talked about all of these since the morning. But I want to basically highlight, and sorry to NLC for this, but I'm going to start the other way around. There is unfair competition for parastatals. Yes, and I think he was very generous when he said, we can take it, but can somebody else? So the question is, between NESPARKs and the NLCs and the FWOs, I mean, I respect for what they're doing. I've seen that in India, the BROs and everything in Bhutan, what they do. But really, giving every task to them just because they are parastatal has destroyed the construction industry in Pakistan. And that's really a challenge for us. There are other important things which basically lack of adequate education, which I pointed out. And I think there is no visioning. And I think this has been, there is a Qureshi report dating back to 1960s, which basically talked about all these things that I'm giving you numbers for right now. All about building the capacity to manage projects. And the economists amongst us always ask me, why is demand not fixing supply? And I always keep trying to tell them that, ladies and gentlemen, the supply, in this case, the supply is weird. I know the best way to explain this is, within contracting and infrastructure, there is something we call buildings, and then the rest is what we call infrastructure, is basically things which are so diverse over such large geographical areas that they pose construction challenges. The more important thing I want you to understand is, it's the us versus them syndrome. I have worked both as a contractor and a consultant in Pakistan, and I have also worked 6 months as a client in the National Highway Authority before I joined the World Bank, all in the 90s. And I can tell you, you put on a different hat. The NHA gentleman who's supposed to be, the project is in the national interest, right? Yet all three parties are against each other. That's the main concern. Now, when you talk of this in Pakistan, the local market is compounding a lot of this. And I have already mentioned parastatal, but value chains. And what by value chain I mean is, for example, the actual construction equipment, where it comes from, where do materials come from, where do little things, do we have capacity? If you even go across the border to Iran, you'll find that they manufacture a huge amount of their own construction equipment. So, that industry. But the good news, ladies and gentlemen, before I close, is that the problems exist world over. This is a 2002 report, very seminal. There is, in every parliament, this discussion that you underestimate costs to get the project through the legislature, and then once you get it, you say, oh shit, the costs are going to rise. So this is a study that covered 20 nations and 5 continents, and this appears to be a global phenomenon. So we're not an exception. But what is really going wrong? What's going wrong is, as I said, globally the infrastructure implementation process is flawed. It always makes sure that the people on all sides, what should be in a partnership, are actually working against. So what do we suggest? What we are suggesting is, and I think somebody in the morning suggested, we can actually look at some projects as normal projects. We can categorize some projects as mega projects, and those should be implemented differently. I don't have the time to go through it, but I just want to leave that thought. Now, the other important thing is, I think, at the right time to be talking about this, that, we really need to focus on brain-drain reversal. Most of our best, as I showed you in the previous slides, all the best machine operators that we produce in the skills all go abroad because the wages attract them there, the quality of life attract them there. So it's not that this is utopia, it has been done before. There are case studies both from Africa, South Africa and from Poland that show you how this can be done. Now, I'm going to skip this, again, forget this. Let's talk a little bit about what am I recommending. So basically, if you go through, and this slide is not meant to be read, you're supposed to get the message of how difficult this whole process is. Now, on this axis, the x-axis, are all the various steps which beginners are more, the PC1 is approved, then the project, then there is tendering. On the y-axis, you see all the various entities that come and mess up the implementation of the PSDP. So all we are really saying is, it's time to collapse this. So for mega projects, which is stuff like the Orange Train, stuff like Nandipur, stuff like Neelam Jhelum, stuff like Dasu, stuff like Suki Kinari, you really need to go into a mode like, for example, I don't know how many of you know about Terminal T5, but the British finally 17 years into their building that terminal realized that the only way to get this terminal built is to make a consortia of all the people that you otherwise use and all the government does. And by the way, one thing we keep forgetting is that everybody gives amazing advice about how certain parts of the project is to be done. Pakistan follows a contract document, PIDE. PIDE defines everything. The problem is nobody in the government understands how to implement PIDE. So we have the best document, we have the best solution, but nobody is really implementing it. So essentially, I do want to encourage the discussion. As Prasad said in the morning, it's time that you started bringing in the private sector, the government to people partnerships, letting people own infrastructure that will improve accountability and destroy this thing. Because when you bring government and people and IPOs, you actually bring the contractor, the consultant, and the visionary all on one page as one party. And I think that's the example. And many countries have done it. You saw this example in the morning, Malaysia, PPP, China again. I mean, China is an exception. There is no private sector in China. Sorry, Nadeem Sahib, आपने अच्छा नहीं किया वैसे मैं I'll stop here, but I mean, sorry, thank you.
Thank you so much. And this brings us down to the last presentation by Sylvia Rontoyani from the World Bank.
It's a very short one.
Could everybody check if their mic is on and the phone? Yes, somebody's fixed it.
Now it is. Okay. I have been asked to talk about some international experiences of public investment management, but no, you can take it. It's okay. It's okay. I have condensed 4 slides. No, it's okay. If we can move to the next slide.
Very deep.
This is just an illustration of 8 main elements and phases in public investment management. Public investment management actually starts way upstream of the project cycle. It needs to start from a national or sectoral strategy that is operationalized into investment plan, an evidence-based investment plan, and based on this are projects identified, prepared, appraised, selected, then included in the budget, and then implemented, monitored, adjusted, completed, moved over for operation, assets registered, and finally a project is evaluated. Now, here I try to condense perhaps a little bit too much into one slide. So this is a partial comparison of some international good practices in public investment management and a contrast of what is currently the case with the PSDP. So, as I mentioned, one issue is that in a strategic public investment process, you have a top-down sector allocation based on national strategic priorities. This can be in a national strategy, or it can be in a 3-year public investment plan. You have an annual budget process, and the PSDP ceilings are issued to all government divisions year in, year out. This is, of course, that a very limited resource envelope gets fragmented into a lot of tiny projects, some of which may not be needed, but a ministry, why would I give up my share of the pie and not propose anything? Of course, I will propose something, get the budget, and then we'll see what we do with it. This is not supposed to be a democratic process. It's supposed to be of the selection of priorities. Ideally, only a few ministries would get budget every year. Second good practice is that projects should be embedded in sector strategies and evidence-based investment plans, or otherwise called master plans. And that means that, first of all, one needs to start from the infrastructure that you already have. There are several efforts ongoing to geotag the infrastructure, but before anything is planned, one needs to know what there already is and what purposes it serves, and then identify gaps. Here, most sectors do not have strategies or medium-term investment plans, so even if the needs and the gaps are correctly identified, there is no reliable way of The third good practice is that the projects are prepared, appraised, and selected on an ongoing basis before entering the budget. In the PSDP, at least to this date, it has not been happening this way. Ministries prepare projects to meet the deadlines of the annual budget process, and so long as they keep within their allocation ceilings, the projects make it into the PSDP. And in most cases, they have been unapproved, which is an issue not only because the project quality may not be adequate, but also if a project is unapproved, in many cases it means that it doesn't really exist. It means that there's no documentation, and it means that there's no implementation readiness. So if the funds are allocated to such a project, chances are that they will not be spent. But at the same time, these funds are taken away from projects that would use them and be completed faster. So yes, there is a reappropriation in the second half of the fiscal year, but that may be too late to do that. Another good practice is multi-annual budgeting that allows for multi-annual procurement contracts, as well as budget unity. These are two different aspects, but I've grouped them together because it's about the structure of the budget. Pakistan still has a bifurcated budget between recurrent expenditure, and development expenditure. This is a practice that in most countries has been abandoned for decades. This is for several reasons, but it tends to create a certain perverse incentives. For example, because the development budget is by definition more flexible, then there is a tendency to put all discretionary expenditure into the development budget. And also to budget separately without taking into account that the project is meant to serve certain policy objectives that may require other types of expenditures. For example, spending on utilities, spending on staff, machinery, and so on. Another good practice is that the public investment projects should focus on capital expenditure, meaning acquisition of new fixed assets, gross capital. The PSDP offers no definition of capital expenditure. So, an extreme is that until very recently, there were major recurrent programs included in the PSDP. For example, the nutrition program, the federal immunization program. These are not bad expenditures, they're very good expenditures, but they are by nature recurrent. This is something that the government does every year. It doesn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end. So the budget is not the place to put them. Capital expenditures need to be separate because they involve certain implementation modalities. They require advanced planning, procurement, monitoring, and completion. The recurrent programs do not have completion by definition. So one consequence of that is that if one asks how much does Pakistan spend on public investment, we don't know. The World Bank has done an analysis for on request of two provincial governments. The only way that we have been able to do this is very imperfect. It has been by looking at the list of projects and attempting to classify them based on the project description. And we find that roughly 70% of the ADP expenditures are essentially capital expenditure. Others are recurrent expenditures, such as subsidies to farmers, scholarship programs, and so on. Again, these are not bad expenditures, but they are different kinds of expenditures. Finally, another international good practice that is not in place in Pakistan is that governments need to have asset registers. That means, as a result of each project, a new asset is supposed to be created. That asset needs to be registered so that the government knows what it owns. And based on this asset registers, maintenance plans are supposed to be prepared in order to optimize the useful life of an asset. And also the value of the asset needs to be accounted for. So Pakistan is but cash poor, but a wealthy country. Unfortunately, it does not know its own wealth because this is not recorded and it's not measured. Because there is no regular maintenance, since this comes out of the recurrent budget, it is often the case that assets are left to deteriorate and then they come back into the development budget for capital rehabilitation. This is actually a waste of resources because you want your limited development budget to be available to expand your asset base, not to constantly repair assets that have not been maintained properly. So this is a very short summary of some international practices that are relevant to Pakistan to consider. So Argentina and Brazil are two large federal countries. The practice that they have put in place is strong mechanisms for intergovernmental coordination of federal and subnational investments based on national strategies. So it is not that the federal government executes everything or decides everything, but there is a coordination, for example, when you build national highways or power plants, then there needs to be collaboration with the states or provinces to make sure that the national highways feed into subnational road systems, feed into grid systems, and one way of achieving that is for capital grants that go into specific sectors. Chile has one of the best public investment management systems, but it is a unitary state. It is known for its very thorough appraisal and selection of projects. And the selection appraisal of projects is done independently of the budget. So it happens on an ongoing basis, and as funds become available and the project is ready to implement, it enters the budget. Another innovation that is now available in many countries is end-to-end procurement, which means that not only are bidding opportunities advertised online, but bids are submitted, evaluated, contracts are prepared electronically, monitored electronically, and payments are made to contractors. There is absolutely no reason why Pakistan cannot implement such a system. The technical capacity exists, but for some reason it has not been done. Another important aspect is active portfolio management, which means that projects are monitored on a regular basis during their implementation, and as needs change or problems arise, they are restructured, sometimes they are cancelled. This doesn't seem to happen here. And Chile also has a very developed system of external impact evaluations that are contracted out by the government to specialized research institutes, and the findings feed back into the planning process in order to improve project quality in the future. Korea is another country with very strong public investment systems. Their distinctive features are very thorough and actually repeated feasibility studies and appraisal by the Korea Development Institute, which is independent of the government. Korea has introduced what is known as the total project cost management, which is updated regularly during project preparation and then during implementation, and it attempts to keep all types of project costs under control, including through rules to limit the elsewhere frequent practice of contract amendments that change, that result in large cost overruns. The projects are prepared under a medium-term expenditure framework with top-down sector allocations. Projects are integrated in programs that have key performance indicators, so they are not prepared out of the wings of ministry. And when the budget is allocated, it is front-loaded, meaning that the projects get most of their expenditure early on, so that they can make as fast progress as possible and be completed in time. I also Vietnam, because it is one of the countries that has introduced a dedicated public investment law a few years ago. Laws sometimes are perhaps overkill to regulate certain things, but also they help deter some bad practices. And another thing that Vietnam has done is decentralized many projects for implementation by subnational governments. And I note that Pakistan still makes provincial projects that are within the areas of competence of provinces and financed from provincial resources, subject to federal approval. This seems rather unnecessary, but also it doesn't serve the purpose of intergovernmental coordination. This process needs to happen upstream before a project is prepared, and it needs to happen at the sector level. When the project comes, whether the planning commission and a province argue over the cost-benefit analysis, it doesn't really serve much of a purpose. The final slide is looking forward. There are several elements of good practices that are being introduced by the Public Financial Management Act that was adopted by the Parliament in June 2019. One that you have already heard about is that unapproved projects will be excluded from the PSDP and the budget. That is a very good thing. But by itself it is not enough. The approach taken by the Planning Commission, which is that 90% of the funds will go to ongoing projects, is a very sensible solution, because it will give the opportunity to ongoing projects to receive adequate financing so that they can be completed on time. Longer term, what needs to happen is that the whole approach to preparing the PSDP needs to change. So more effort and more time needs to go into upstream planning and less into review of specific projects. Then the PFM law requires that projects be part of sector strategies or plans. So again, this will involve a lot of work for divisions and ministries, and capacity building as well, because most ministries do not have such plans. There is also the issue of the fact that you have 40-something divisions, but in fact there are not that many sectors. So the question is, how can the Planning Commission help bring divisions that work in related areas together to develop a sector strategy? Another innovation is that the PFM Act introduces a distinction between core or national projects and sector projects. These are not very clearly defined, but it provides an opportunity to make the PSDP more strategic by focusing on the largest projects, and this can be defined perhaps in monetary terms, but also in terms of the impact, whether they involve more than one sector, more than one division, and instead of the Planning Commission looking at every single project over 2 billion, it would be able to do a much more thorough job and provide more constructive inputs if its remit was limited to a few strategic projects. Another innovation is that the PFM Act requires that a project be executed through the Treasury single account, through assignment accounts that will be Treasury sub-accounts. And the financial reporting needs to take place in subs. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. There are many projects that are being executed outside the Treasury through commercial bank accounts. This may be convenient. It is actually understandable that implementing entities may find it easier to avoid the pre-audit and other complications of project execution. However, it results, for one thing, into an exaggerated view of the budget deficit. Because once money leaves the Treasury and goes into a commercial bank account, the project account, when the finance ministry looks at the budget execution, it looks like the money has been spent. In fact, it may not be spent. And it also makes it impossible to know how much has been spent on capital budget. And these are very serious issues. The PFM Act also requires the preparation of asset registries for infrastructure and other fixed assets such as valuable equipment and immovable property. This again is a very useful thing to do for planning purposes, for maintenance purposes, and also for the purpose of future projects. Once the government knows what land it owns, then it is easier to plan new projects and also to prepare concessions. Concessions are perhaps one of the most feasible, financially feasible source of public-private partnership, because it brings down the cost of the contractor. They do not have to acquire the land. And if it is properly designed, instead of the government having to take on liabilities, it can become a steady stream of revenue. Yes, that's it. Finally, the PFM Act requires regular monitoring and reporting of fiscal risks, outstanding commitments and contingent liabilities, including those from public-private partnerships and other contractual obligations. So this again has implications for the way some public investment projects are prepared. And it will require revisions to the chart of accounts, notably to introduce program scopes, to the PSDP guidelines and manuals, and in line with that, the revision of SOPs and business processes. So I will stop here to allow some time for questions and comments.
Thank you so much, and we'll straight away go to questions from the audience.
The three speakers talked about the project life cycle. Mr. Ahmed talked about 8 to 18 years of maturity project. My question may be addressed to Dr. Saab from Planning Commission. Could you qualify this 8 to 18 years of average project completion? That's one. And second question is, like the lady from the World Bank says, that they have the process of abandoning the project. Technology project, 8 to 18 years is impossible. You have a technology upgrade. So, your views about 8 to 18 years on the average project completion, one. Two, do you have a cradle to grave policy In technology, we have a cradle to grave policy. We don't have, you mentioned about your project life cycle, but you did not say abandoning or the grave policy. You only mentioned about feasibility, maturity. So do you have a policy of abandoning the project and put it in the grave rather than wait for 18 years to have a technology project mature?
Thank you, Sililia, for a very good exposition on the public expenditure management system. My question to the Planning Commission is that is there a move to have a holistic public expenditure management system in place with all the elements that have been pointed out? Because as we've been debating since the morning, PSDP by itself is not going to deliver growth. It has to be embedded in a more, in a macro framework with sectoral linkages. So is there any thought on that at the moment, or will it be the recommendation of this House to kickstart such a PEMS?
So last question.
Thank you. I think a great divergence of in identification of the very immediate problems with the PSDP and the project implementation tells much about what is wrong with the entire process of project implementation. How implementer has prioritized different kind of problems, and then the kind of the people who are perceiving or ideation of these PSDP projects identify different prioritized and prioritize different problems as the most imminent ones. My question to the honorable panelists from the Planning Commission is that do you have any kind of strategy that in Pakistan, when we talk about the aggressive political will to have the PSDP projects included by the honorable politicians through discretionary funds are like a separate thing to do, but do you have any kind of thing that where a strong and strategic PSDP project can overrule the adventurous political will in idealizing or ideation of projects?
So we have two questions from Dr. Afzal regarding the project life cycle and about the political influence into the entire process.
Thank you very much, madam. And thank you, made good questions. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, I may not be able to answer all the questions. But let me tell that everything is not practice. There are so many good things. You said that project takes 8 to 18 years. There might be one or two projects kind of with very peculiar situation or some circumstances. But if we feel that the project is getting longer without any good reason, we stop that project. We stop releases. And we also fix the penalty on that. And before that, there is a mechanism at Planning Commission. We have a full-fledged monitoring wing who used to submit monitoring reports, and in the light of those reports, then we conduct in-house review, and there is also a review of second quarter, third quarter, like that, and where we feel that ministry is not or the particular project is not on the track, we propose certain things, and after a certain time we abandon that project. And second, I said in my presentation, we are forming the new Financial Management Act. According to that act, we have changed so many things. Rest assured that in the upcoming PSDP, there were not any unapproved project. And the other thing, politically motivated projects. Yes, we are not getting any political motivated project directly Planning Commission. The mandate of Planning Commission is not to get projects directly from the political corridors or from any other corner. Rather, there are line ministries who are used to submit projects, PCM.
At much to the chagrin of the chair, I've been granted permission. So, quick intervention here. The 8-year is an average of 15 years of the national level projects. The 18 is an extreme example of the average we found in the irrigation department of Punjab. So I think that is why we quoted those numbers. Those are averages. It's not one project. Now the cradle to grave, जो है, उसकी अगर if I want to explain this, the basic procedure followed globally. I think both of you is something called a SAM analysis. We tried to do this when the Benazir Sahaba came and tried to shut down the project, the Islamabad Peshawar motorway. Later on, it was converted to a 2-lane and then eventually structures. This process continued for about 2 years. But basically, had a sense prevailed, a sunk cost analysis was done. There is no such procedure undertaken by the Planning Commission. So we have been intricately, I mean, personally, myself, add one more thing, which is that, you know, this whole thing about political intervention, when I said that actually if you look at a 15-year history, you will find that allocations are made, right? And in those allocations, we found that in that year, when releases are made, let's say there are 10 projects and there are 3 new projects added by some new politician. So actually the releases are made so that the 3 are catered and the rest are not catered. So that has also happened, and it is a clear numeric gain you can see if you look at the implementation of the PSDP. Let me give you a simple example. In 2015, a year after I retired, I came back to Pakistan. I myself was a contractor looking at the Sahiwal coal-fired power plant. When I went into the Planning Commission and asked for approved PC1s for all the CPEC projects, I was given 1-page notes, which was basically all that existed. So if somebody is telling me that this process is improving, well, I pray to God it is, because as far as I know, the actual process is still stymied. Thank you.
Now the last question that we had regarding the holistic public expenditure approach. I would request our representative from World Bank, please.
I think a lot of things are being done, but as it is highlighted in the the Financial Act, also the various indicators that we should look at, overall India. Even the Deputy Chairman Planning Commission, the first session highlighted that we are going to look at it holistically. It has not been done, let's admit, and that there will be a kind of policy framework or guidelines for each of the overall policy, then sectoral policies. The leadership will decide the kind of priorities, but overall it will have a scientific, I would say, based on those kind of parameters which are for various sectoral development, I think, portfolio. So then we'll not, so from the project mode we will go to kind of development. It's going to be kind of portfolio management, I would call it. Secondly, each of the cycle of the step of the project cycle is being considered that and the most important is the initial phase, that is the identification of the project, what is to be done. Then at that time, because we would like to define things at that level, that how it will be implemented. It is going to be it all is from the very first, what outcome is going to be out of this project. So I think that kind of framework, it will take time, I think. But I think in the PSDP, as it was highlighted by Dr. Afzal, that those who are going to formulate this thing, they are going to have this consideration. But I think there's a big gap in capacity, as it was highlighted. I think even in the Planning Commission, the capacity, it needs to be keeping in view the kind of need, it needs to be enhanced. Similarly, at the ministerial level, at division level, there's a big gap in the human resource and the kind of, what we expect in that time and space. Second thing which we want to define this thing that because those procedures, that let's suppose, for example, if it is a monitoring, so by whom, when and what is going to be monitored, so that would be there. And as it was alluded by Dr. Afzal that, the releases would be made after the physical, progress of the project as it is for the donor funded project. So we will have more stringent systems of, keeping the track of the progress of the projects. Then, after because as I also highlighted earlier that, during implementation, all of the respective, our technical section will be looking not only for the approval, but also looking at implementation. Whatever issues are, they are, for example, indicated by the project directors or by the ministries, that would also be, in a kind of meeting, we will also visit key projects that the Planning Commission will carry out only TPV. And now there was no, there'll be, and if there's no capacity, we are going to engage consultants to have that kind of, observations of what is the actually on ground. Then, we are going to have the readjustment of the feedback. So I think and then, the documentation is very important that, it is so hard to have the hard copies, even search for that, and you have to really search. So I think what we are going to think that all will be digitized, that VC1, VC feasibility studies, implementation, plan, monitoring reports, they'll all be put on record. So I think for first 2 years, it will be manual and digital. So there are a lot of that, keeping then, after the completion, we have PC4s. We have directed the ministries that, to submit the PC4s of the projects. But, as there is, there has been a precedence. So I think there's a kind of momentum or inertia, I would say, which, it will take some time to really to educate and put all the ministries and divisions in that kind of framework. We had 2 quarterly reviews of the PSDPs, as it was the third one also. It will take place that. So I think that adjustment is there. So what I was saying that, we will have the complete cycle. Similarly, looking at holistically, that if there is an investment, so what it will be evaluated, important projects that will be decided earlier, which projects are going to create that socio-economic impact and how we are going to evaluate it. So that will be done. And ultimately, the feedback to the system, which was highlighted by many of the panelists, so it will be catered for. So I think it's a kind of thing which is there. It will take some time, but I think we will start doing it from this financial year. Over to the chair.